Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining my session today. My name is Maggie Slowik, and I work for a team at IDC called Manufacturing Insights. And in the next 15 minutes or so, I will talk to you about the future of manufacturing and what exactly that will look like. And in particular, I will talk to you about the capabilities that manufacturers have to develop, why technology is key in enabling what we call the next normal, so the post-COVID period, and how technology investments need to be approached now to really yield the maximum result. And over the past few months, we frequently have been asked the questions by both vendors as well as manufacturers themselves. Well, why should manufacturing companies invest in digital transformation when they have been shaken up by the pandemic so much? And let me ask this question here to set the scene, which you could just move on to the next slide, please. And this is tricky to answer because manufacturers have experienced a multitude of shocks since the outbreak of the crisis. And we're just building up the slide. And you see these shocks here on the left-hand side. So for one, they experienced a supply shock. Many manufacturers had to reduce and even entirely stop their production. Others had to switch their production programs into producing face shields or ventilators to meet humanitarian needs. But of course, it's not all about production itself. We also saw a drop in demand, both in B2B and B2C, which is what we refer to as demand shock here. Imagine the impact on revenue stream, for example, for a candy manufacturer servicing cinemas. This could mean 15% of revenue just gone overnight. And then think of the workforce shock. In fact, our research shows that only between 75 to 80% of workforce are currently back on shop floors today. But despite this crisis, we have seen some good news. Manufacturers are in competitive overdrive. Here at IDC, we have been running a COVID-19 impact survey series to understand how exactly companies have been impacted. And what you can see here is that 67% of EU manufacturers want to take advantage of their competitors' weaknesses and gain market share. And 56% want to introduce new business offerings. So despite the impact the latest COVID-19 crisis has had on the manufacturing industry, it has certainly not stalled manufacturers' efforts to achieve competitiveness and the desire to innovate. Next slide, please. So how are manufacturers changing their capabilities as they are navigating through the crisis and preparing for what we call the next normal? What we see here are the initiatives that we collected from our COVID-19 impact survey, and we mapped them across 3 timelines. And the way to look at this is from the bottom up. So first, for the past few months, we have seen an immediate reaction entailing working from home measures and the revision of business continuity plans. And moving into the purple area, as companies are heading into recession in the second half of the year, they will focus on improving their forecasting capabilities and their customer engagement model. And then in the longer term, heading into the yellow area, or even sort of like into mid-2021 and beyond, companies are looking at diversifying their supplier base and engaging in ecosystems to create more value-added products and services. And across all of these timelines, just animate it one bit, companies are working on digitizing their operations, leveraging more automation, as well as contactless solutions. And then just one more animation. And sustainability is also on the rise. I'm sure you might have wondered about this. 46% of European manufacturers state that the pandemic has had a positive impact on their sustainability development goals. So it's certainly something that's currently on the rise and taken very seriously. By the way, this is IDC's take on what the recovery will look like. And against these different stages, we plotted the activities that we hear or see manufacturers undertaking. So first of all, at IDC, we expect not a V, but rather a U-shaped recovery. And you can well relate. Most companies are already beyond experiencing the first shock, the reaction phase. And the majority, in fact, 41%, are now facing an economic slowdown. And as they are bracing themselves for economic recession, they have to raise their operational agility, their process visibility, and their demand sensing capability. And in this critical time, it's important to know that these manufacturers can't afford to spend money without seeing an immediate return on investment. And after this long valley, economic recovery will eventually emerge, but the other side of the U will be very different. Now, we're talking about, you have already heard it, a next normal, where companies will make use of more technology to potentially operate in a whole new way. And in this recovery, they will drive innovation, which requires the acceleration of their digital transformation investments. We also think that manufacturing, actually we're staying on the slide, sorry. We also think that manufacturing will possibly be based on smaller market pockets and shorter value chain. And we also see product, services, and relationships shifting from face-to-face to digital. So some companies are looking at creating their own marketplaces as their end game to be able to disrupt the market and lead the ecosystem. Essentially, in this environment, companies have to reconsider their supply chain footprint and transform their operations to make them fit for purpose and ready for the next disruption. And in fact, successful companies will be those that will be able to embed new digital skills in their processes in order to cope with the unprecedented challenges that the time is posing on them. So as companies recover and prepare for the next normal, that also means working on their resilience. Animate, please. So when we asked manufacturers how resilient that they think they are across a number of dimensions, we see that even during the pandemic, they have a very high degree of confidence, especially when it comes to the resilience of their brand. But at the same time, if we look at the next image, they also know that they have to make changes to various aspects of their business resiliency strategy, especially when it comes to their workforce. But more worryingly is the fact that quite a number of manufacturers in Europe, well, they're still unsure whether or not they should make changes and whether their level of resiliency is really adequate to handle future challenges. So really, they need a lot of help with that. And saying that, let's take a look at the areas driving most change in the supply chain. And this comes from our supply chain survey run in April. Here we asked respondents to provide their top three answers, if you will, and there are two ways of looking at this chart. If you look at the overall average ranking, you see that cost reduction is the biggest change driver. But if you look at what ranked as the number one choice, and we can animate this, it is really about new technology investments. So maintaining technology investments, even during these troubled times, is important. And why is that so? Well, it creates digital value. And in fact, let's take a look at the business case for digital transformation, or DX. Yes, COVID-19 has been a wake-up call for European manufacturers, but there's also been what I would call an early mover advantage. Next slide, please. So since 2013, we have been tracking the performance of a panel of 1,000 manufacturing companies worldwide, that is in terms of both revenue as well as profit. We then divided them into two groups: companies that have made significant digital investments and companies that were less advanced in digital transformation. And then we tracked the performance over time. And you can see that companies that are more advanced in digital transformation are doing noticeably better and doing so consistently. And what you can also observe is an emerging divide here. So companies that have more digital technologies in place and can use them better to transform their processes are, as a result, outperforming their peers who are not as advanced. And in fact, the best performing companies armed with a digital native culture, tools, and processes, they're speeding away from the rest by improving their operational efficiency and their cost, their agility, their time to market, and even their customer acquisition rate. And this was already happening up to last year, certainly before COVID-19 happened. And it's a trend that we're going to keep an eye on at IDC. We think that this polarization effect is going to increase. And on the right-hand side, you see that at a C-level level, they realize that it's important closing the gap in their digital transformation journey. And they're not taking any cautionary approach. In fact, they're actively investing in disruptive technologies that can enable agility, efficiency, as well as innovation. And in fact, we currently hear of a lot of companies that are fast forwarding the digital transformation effort. Now, I also wanted to spend a few moments talking about the impact of the crisis on IT. And what you can see here is also on an executive level, IT is the function that is gaining the most relevance because of the crisis. In fact, IT leads the force of this transformation. But with that said, companies are having to reinvent their IT organizations and their skills and their practices to become more fit for purpose in the future for this modern world that we're expecting post-COVID-19. Now you can see at the bottom of the right-hand graph that enterprise applications and user experience, they still matter, but the priorities of skills, they have been reshuffled. You see featuring at the top process automation, data analytics, and cybersecurity. And by the way, we also see the rise of digital application units making use of low-code technologies. And this has the potential to change how manufacturers solve their problems. And it will also create new use cases across the extended enterprise and make IT faster and more independent, if you will. Let's take a closer look at how investments are being made on the next slide, please. Now, we see a combined group, if we just animate this, of manufacturers who either aggressively seek out emerging technologies or they want to be the leaders of innovative technologies, new technologies. And these two groups, they are really the risk takers who want to create advantage. But you will also notice that just under 40% of companies, they have a more pragmatic approach. They are looking for proven technologies, yes, but not necessarily innovative ones. And while the approach to new technology investment ranges from being, say, conservative to maximizing the opportunity to the fullest, manufacturers realize that this has to be done at speed and with a focus on return on investments. Now, let's take a look next at which technologies manufacturers are investing in. And what I'm showing you on this slide is a selection of technologies which European manufacturers are expressing to have a higher demand for as a result of COVID-19. You see a very strong appetite for technologies such as analytics and process automation in particular, and no surprise really, but overall investments are certainly ongoing and not seeing a freeze as you might have expected. Now, interestingly, technologies such as video conferencing and collaborative tools, which many other industries have a very strong appetite for, are not seeing as much demand by manufacturers. And this is good news, I think, because the focus on technologies such as robotics and AI and IoT, augmented and virtual reality, etc., they show that manufacturers are very, very serious about their digital transformation and they are ready to embark on bold and ambitious projects. And these are the technologies that are complex and time intensive to implement, and they require the involvement from a range of stakeholders. And again, this really shows the serious intentions that manufacturers have in terms of pushing the digital transformation forward. And where does the cloud come into play, you might ask? Well, we are seeing some shifting behavior here as well. Overall, we see cloud is on the rise, but here what we show you are sort of across the main workloads in manufacturing, that cloud architectures are gaining traction. So the move from an on-prem configuration, right, from the lightest color to sort of the blue shaded colors. And there are different types of cloud infrastructure scenarios that manufacturing companies are embracing at the moment. And the idea is to really drive value to business in form of superior resiliency and in preparation for future disruptions as well. I know we often speak about cloud benefits being around cost reduction, innovation, and scalability. But there's actually at the moment a very strong consensus in the community that it's about creating resiliency across processes. And again, that's really good news. So where are manufacturing companies ultimately heading with the digital transformation targets post-COVID-19? And what you can see here on the left-hand side is that while operational excellence still matters, of course, 80% of manufacturers, they want to build relationships with their customers and deliver meaningful products. So they're looking to leap towards what I would call a data-driven market engagement. And to enable that, we see a shift happening from the enterprise to the ecosystem. So today, manufacturers are increasingly placing importance on looking outside of their own industry and seeking value-added initiatives that are centered around ecosystem collaboration. So the drivers of ecosystem collaboration could be numerous, right? It could be about increasing B2B process efficiency or scaling innovations very fast, or data monetization and capitalization, or enabling new business models. Whatever the reasons might be, there's a lot of collaboration opportunity externally, both up and downstream. So do consider that. And to wrap up my presentation here, there are just a couple of key takeaways. I would say, first of all, this is not the time to put digital transformation on hold, but it's really the time to seize the moment. You have seen there's a lot of companies that are very hungry for innovation, for capturing more market share. And you're going to see a lot of companies fast forwarding their investments, and you should certainly not be falling behind. You've seen the polarization effect. You don't want to be falling into this sort of scheme and fall behind by any stretch. So it's really time to invest in digital transformation today, more so than ever. The business case is certainly clear. Number two, manufacturers, you can relate to this, were forced to change at an unprecedented rate overnight, back in March, back in April. So it's good to keep innovation sort of as part of your focus, but certainly consider the power of the ecosystem. I just talked about it. There's a lot of ecosystem collaboration opportunities outside of your own company wall, if you will. So not only with suppliers, but also with your customers or partners. So there's a lot of sort of opportunity to be explored there. And last but not least, I would say be very proactive or proactive even with your vendors. Have conversations with them about how you want to be conservative, maybe about your spending, or applying more financial discipline, how you need to speed up implementations and produce faster return on investment. So be very open with them about sort of the pressures you are experiencing, but also maybe the way you want to change, the ways you want to change working, as well as the types of business models you want to invest in. So it's good to have these upfront conversations with your vendors and also understand more about their roadmap going forward. So with that, that concludes my presentation, and I thank you very much for taking the time to listen in.